I'm Mia Reynolds, 33, and I'll never forget the devastation on my daughter Harper's face when she read that text message. She'd spent 4 days preparing an elaborate feast for my mother Victoria's 68th birthday celebration. 22 guests were expected at our home. Then my father Benjamin's message arrived at 3:47 p.m. Change of plans, celebrating at Le Bernardin instead, adults only affair, apologies for short notice. Something inside me shattered. After years of their subtle dismissals, I wanted to scream, but I didn't. Instead, I made a choice that transformed everything. Before I share what happened next, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever had to turn heartbreak into opportunity. My relationship with my parents, Victoria and Benjamin Reynolds, has always been a delicate dance around their expectations. Victoria came from Boston's financial elite, the kind of family whose name graced museum wings and private school endowments. Her identity was constructed entirely around social positioning and maintaining prestigious appearances. Benjamin built his fortune through a tech consulting empire, starting with a small software firm in his 30s and expanding into a multi-state operation. His success was undeniable, but it came with an obsession about public image that matched Victoria's perfectly. Their world revolved around impressing the right people: board members, country club associates, even casual acquaintances. External validation was their currency, and they raised me to understand that love came with conditions attached to achievement. Growing up, I learned quickly that their affection fluctuated based on how well I reflected their values. When I won academic awards or dated the correct type of young man, they beamed with satisfaction. When I struggled with advanced mathematics or expressed interest in social work instead of law, their disappointment was crushing. Mia, posture matters when the Hendersons are watching, Victoria would whisper at charity events. Must you wear that particular dress? The Ashfords are bringing their eldest son tonight, Benjamin would comment before dinner parties. Every success was measured against how it enhanced their reputation. Every mistake became a personal embarrassment they needed to manage. I absorbed this messaging for decades, believing my value came from others' approval. When I was 30, my carefully orchestrated life collapsed. My marriage to David, a successful architect my parents cherished, ended after 5 years when we realized we'd built our relationship on external expectations rather than genuine connection. The divorce was amicable but emotionally devastating, particularly when I discovered I was 10 weeks pregnant just as our separation became final. My parents' reaction was entirely predictable. Victoria worried about social perception while Benjamin concerned himself with family reputation. Neither seemed particularly interested in my emotional well-being or the challenges ahead. People will talk, Victoria actually suggested I might consider alternatives, a hint I immediately shut down. I was keeping my baby regardless of circumstances. Harper's birth shifted our family dynamics unexpectedly. Though my parents initially viewed her as evidence of my poor choices, she quickly became the light in all our lives. Victoria, surprisingly, developed a connection with Harper that caught everyone off guard. Perhaps it was because Harper naturally excelled in areas Victoria valued. She was artistic, musically gifted, and socially graceful. Or maybe grandparenthood softened something in Victoria that motherhood hadn't touched. Whatever the reason, Harper adored her grandmother, and Victoria seemed to genuinely love her in return. I did everything possible to nurture the relationship between Harper and my parents. I overlooked their last-minute cancellations when more important social obligations arose. I smiled through their subtle criticisms of my parenting approach. I pretended not to notice when they showered Harper with expensive gifts while simultaneously commenting on my modest apartment or career choice. It's unfortunate you're limited to that small space when you could have had so much more, Victoria would observe during visits, glancing disapprovingly at my comfortable but simple living room. Social work, I suppose it's meaningful even if the compensation is modest, Benjamin would add, emphasizing the final word as though it pained him. I became a high school counselor, work that brought genuine fulfillment but constant disappointment from my parents. In their view, I had squandered my potential and embarrassed them professionally. But helping teenagers navigate their futures gave me purpose in ways their approval never could. Despite our complicated history, Harper developed a special bond with Victoria. They shared interests in classical music, vintage fashion, and Italian cuisine. Victoria would take Harper to symphony performances, afternoon tea at luxury hotels, and occasionally shopping expeditions that made me cringe at the extravagance but smile at Harper's joy. That's why Victoria's 68th birthday held such significance for Harper. It represented an opportunity to give back to the grandmother who had shown her glimpses of unconditional love, even if that same love had never extended to me. The inspiration first sparked 3 months before Victoria's birthday during one of our monthly family dinners. Victoria was reminiscing about her childhood when she mentioned a special dish her grandmother used to prepare for celebrations. Ossobuco, Victoria sighed wistfully. Nobody prepares it like Nana did, with those tender marrow bones and the gremolata garnish. Such an elaborate production, but those dinners created the most cherished memories. I saw the spark ignite in Harper's eyes immediately. During our drive home, she couldn't stop talking about hosting a surprise birthday celebration. Mom, I could learn all of Grandma's favorite traditional dishes. We could transform our dining room, make it absolutely elegant. It would be like giving her back pieces of her own heritage. I hesitated, knowing the complexity involved in Victoria's demanding standards. Honey, that's a beautiful thought, but preparing dinner for 22 people is enormously challenging. Maybe we could plan something smaller? Harper shook her head determinedly. No, it has to be special. I've been saving money from my bookstore job. I can afford the ingredients if we budget carefully. For the next 3 months, Harper became a culinary researcher. She contacted Victoria's sister Margaret to collect family recipes. She studied techniques for dishes that hadn't been common since the 1960s. She created detailed shopping lists, preparation schedules, and cost analyses. Watching her dedication moved me profoundly. She worked additional shifts at the neighborhood bookstore, carefully saving every dollar for ingredients. She practiced complex techniques during weekends, mastering pasta making, stock reduction, and proper meat braising temperatures. The week before the birthday, Harper requested 4 days off school, something the honors student had never done. Her teachers, understanding her academic standing and the celebration's significance, provided assignments in advance. The first day focused on desserts and items that could be prepared ahead. Harper created an elaborate tiramisu with ladyfingers she made from scratch. She prepared cannoli shells that would be filled just before serving. She made gelato in Victoria's favorite flavor, pistachio with honey swirls. Do you think the gelato is too sweet? Harper asked, offering me a taste. Her face was dusted with flour, her hair pulled back, but her eyes shone with purpose. It's perfect, I assured her, amazed by her natural talent. Grandma will be overwhelmed. The second day involved side dishes and marinating the main courses, our refrigerator filled with containers of prepared vegetables, sauces, and seasoned meats. Harper moved through our kitchen with surprising efficiency, consulting her detailed timeline regularly. She prepared an authentic Caesar salad, the kind served at Victoria's childhood country club. She made delicate arancini from a recipe that had appeared in her great-grandmother's favorite Italian cookbook. She spent hours forming perfect tortellini, each one hand-folded with precision. These are Grandma's absolute favorites, she explained, showing me the elegant pasta shapes. Great-great-grandmother used to serve these at her Sunday dinners in Little Italy. By the third day, our modest home had been transformed. Harper had rented elegant linens in cream and gold, Victoria's preferred color scheme. She'd arranged flowers in crystal vases borrowed from neighbors. She'd polished antique silverware that had been a wedding gift I rarely used. Our dining table was extended to maximum capacity with all available leaves. Harper had created handwritten place cards for each guest, decorating them with small watercolor paintings personalized to each person. For Victoria's card, she'd painted a miniature replica of the Italian villa where Victoria had honeymooned decades earlier. The centerpiece was the birthday cake, a 4-layer creation covered in fondant and decorated with sugar flowers cascading down the sides. Harper had incorporated family photographs printed on edible paper, creating a visual timeline of Victoria's life around the base. Do you think she'll like it? Harper asked, adjusting a sugar rose. Is it sophisticated enough? My throat tightened with emotion. It's the most beautiful cake I've ever seen, she'll be speechless. As evening approached on the third day, our home filled with incredible aromas. The osso buco simmered, releasing scents of wine, herbs, and slow-cooked vegetables. The focaccia bread cooled, its surface golden and dimpled. Individual chocolate soufflés waited by the oven, ready for final baking. Harper had just changed into an elegant dress that complemented the decor when my phone buzzed with a text message, a message that would destroy everything we'd worked toward. The text arrived at 3:47 p.m., exactly 3 hours and 13 minutes before guests were scheduled to arrive. I was helping Harper arrange the final table decorations when my phone chimed with Benjamin's familiar notification tone. Assuming he was confirming arrival details, I glanced down casually. The message read, "Change of plans, celebrating at Le Bernardin instead, adults-only affair, apologies for short notice." I stared at the screen, certain I'd misunderstood. I read it again, then again. The words remained unchanged, their meaning devastatingly clear. My parents had unilaterally altered Victoria's birthday plans without consulting us, without considering Harper's tremendous effort, and with barely an acknowledgement of the disruption. A follow-up message appeared. "You're welcome to join us at 8:30. Reservation for 24 at Le Bernardin, formal attire expected." My hands trembled as I processed what was happening. Le Bernardin was the city's most exclusive restaurant, the type with a 3-month waiting list and entrees costing more than I spent on groceries weekly. Formal attire expected meant Benjamin anticipated evening gowns and suits, and adults only meant Harper, the person who had devoted 4 days to this celebration, was specifically excluded. I immediately tried calling Benjamin, but the call went straight to voicemail. Victoria's phone did the same. Growing desperate, I opened social media and discovered posts from 3 days earlier. My cousin Patricia expressing excitement about the elegant birthday celebration at Le Bernardin, my Aunt Susan asking about appropriate gifts for a sophisticated evening out. They had planned this for days, everyone in the family knew except us. Through scattered comments and responses, I pieced together what had occurred. Victoria's wealthy friend Constance had suggested Le Bernardin after learning about our quaint home dinner. She had connections with the restaurant's owner and could secure their exclusive private dining room despite the waiting list. Victoria, unable to resist celebrating at the most prestigious venue in the city rather than her daughter's modest home, had eagerly agreed. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Once again, image and social status mattered more to my parents than genuine relationships or consideration. The fact that it came at Harper's expense made it unbearable. I stood in our beautifully decorated dining room, surrounded by evidence of my daughter's love and effort, feeling familiar anger rising anger I had suppressed countless times throughout my life. But this time wasn't about me. It was about Harper, and that made it infinitely worse. In that moment, I faced a choice about how to tell my daughter, who was in the kitchen putting finishing touches on the elaborate tiramisu, completely unaware that her 4 days of work were about to become meaningless. I took a deep breath and walked into the kitchen. Harper looked up with a radiant smile that immediately faded when she saw my expression. "Mom, what's wrong?" I showed her the text message. I couldn't bring myself to soften the blow with explanations or excuses. She deserved the unvarnished truth even though it would devastate her. Harper read the message once, twice, 3 times just as I had. Her expression didn't crumble dramatically. There were no immediate tears or outbursts. Instead, something more heartbreaking happened. I watched quiet devastation wash over her features, followed by resigned understanding that seemed far too mature for her 16 years. "Oh," she said softly, "I see." That simple response broke my heart more than any tears could have because I recognized it. It was the same quiet acceptance I had perfected over decades of similar disappointments. The realization that my daughter had already learned to expect such treatment made me nauseous. "They must have had good reasons," Harper said, her voice small but determined to be understanding. She carefully set down the piping bag she'd been using on the tiramisu. "Maybe Grandma preferred a restaurant setting." "No," I interrupted firmly. "There's no excuse for this, sweetheart, not for the last-minute notice, not for excluding you, not for any of it." Harper nodded, but I could see her struggling to process the rejection. Her eyes swept across the kitchen at the magnificent tiramisu she'd spent hours perfecting, at the containers of food prepared with such care, at the handwritten menu cards stacked neatly on the counter. "What did I do wrong?" she asked quietly, and that question pierced straight through my soul. Because it was the exact question I had asked myself countless times throughout childhood when faced with my parents' conditional approval. It was the internalized belief that if only I had been better, smarter, more accomplished, more socially appropriate, then perhaps I would have been worthy of their unconditional love. In that moment, watching history repeat itself with my daughter, something fundamental shifted inside me. The protective instinct that surged through me wasn't just about this incident. It was about breaking a generational pattern of emotional manipulation and conditional love. "You did absolutely nothing wrong," I said, taking her hands in mine. "Nothing. This isn't about you or anything you did or didn't do. This is about them and their priorities." Harper nodded again, but I could see she didn't fully believe me. She glanced at the tiramisu, Victoria's face smiling from one of the edible photographs, and for a brief moment her composure cracked. "I just wanted to make her happy," she whispered, a single tear sliding down her cheek. That single, quiet tear was my breaking point. I had spent my entire life accommodating my parents' behavior, making excuses for their actions, protecting Harper from the full impact of their conditional love. But standing in our kitchen, surrounded by evidence of my daughter's extraordinary effort and genuine love, I knew something had to change. I couldn't control my parents' actions, but I could control how we responded to them, and I refused to let this moment become another scar on Harper's heart. My first instinct was to call my parents and unleash decades of suppressed frustration, to demand they acknowledge the hurt they'd caused, to insist they change their plans and honor Harper's efforts. But as I looked at my daughter, still processing her disappointment with quiet dignity, I realized confrontation wouldn't heal this wound. It might satisfy my anger temporarily, but it wouldn't address the deeper issue. Harper needed to know her effort mattered, even if not to the intended recipients. I took a deep breath and made a decision that prioritized healing over confrontation. "Harper," I said gently, "let's sit down for a moment." We settled at our kitchen island, surrounded by the fruits of her labor, the exquisite food, the beautiful decorations, the love poured into every detail. "I'm furious with your grandparents right now," I admitted, choosing honesty. "But I'm also incredibly proud of what you've accomplished here. This wasn't just about a party, it was about expressing love through action, and that matters regardless of how others respond." Harper nodded, wiping away the tear that had escaped. "I know, I really wanted Grandma to experience everything. I understand, and I'm not going to pretend this doesn't hurt because it does. It's completely okay to feel disappointed and upset. Those feelings are entirely valid. We sat in silence for a moment, letting the reality settle around us. Then I asked the question that would redirect our evening. So, what do we do with all this incredible food you've prepared? Harper looked around, considering. I guess we could freeze some of it. Or, I said, an idea forming, we could still host a dinner just for different guests. Like who? I thought about the senior center where I volunteered monthly, a place that provided resources, meals, and community for people from all walks of life, people who would genuinely appreciate a home-cooked meal prepared with love. What if we called Margaret at the senior center, asked if we could host an impromptu dinner there tonight? For people who would truly appreciate your incredible cooking, I watched as Harper considered the idea, a small spark reigniting in her eyes. We could do that, we absolutely could, and I bet we could find plenty of people to join us with just a few phone calls. Harper glanced at the dining room, set for 22 with our finest china and rented linens. But what about all the decorations? We'll pack them up and take them with us. We'll transform the senior center just like we did our dining room. For the first time since reading the text, Harper's lips curved into a genuine smile. That could actually be really wonderful. It won't erase the hurt, honey. I won't pretend it will, but it might help us transform this disappointment into something meaningful. We immediately sprang into action. I called Margaret, the senior center director, explaining our situation and asking if we could use their space on short notice. Mia, are you kidding me? Margaret responded enthusiastically. We'd be honored. The center is open until 10 tonight anyway for the weekly game night, but only about 12 people usually come. Having a special dinner would be incredible. Next, I reached out to friends and neighbors. My closest friend Alina and her husband Carlos immediately offered to help transport food and decorations. My colleague James promised to spread the word among our fellow counselors. My neighbor Mrs. Chen, a retired caterer, volunteered to help serve and keep the dishes at perfect temperature. Within 2 hours, we had an overwhelming response. People weren't just willing to attend, they were eager to help, touched by Harper's story and determined to make the evening special. As we packed containers of food into coolers and carefully boxed the elaborate tiramisu, Harper's spirits visibly lifted. Her movements became more purposeful, her expression more determined. Mom, she said suddenly, looking up from wrapping the cannoli shells, could we invite the residents from Sunset Manor too, the ones who never get visitors? Sunset Manor was the assisted living facility where Harper volunteered on weekends, reading to residents and helping with activities. Many residents rarely had family visits. That's a beautiful idea, I said, feeling a surge of pride at my daughter's compassionate heart. I'll call the activities director right now. By 7 o'clock, the time our original guests should have been arriving at our home, we were instead setting up at the senior center. Volunteers had helped transport everything, and the transformation was remarkable. The center's multi-purpose room now featured elegant table settings, floral arrangements, and soft lighting from the candles Harper had selected. As we put finishing touches on the space, I watched my daughter direct volunteers with confidence and grace. When the first Sunset Manor residents began arriving, I saw Harper straighten her shoulders and smile, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. In that moment, I realized we weren't just salvaging a ruined evening. We were creating something far more meaningful than the original plan could ever have been. The senior center transformed from a utilitarian space into something magical. The folding tables disappeared under cream and gold linens. Mismatched chairs were unified with white chair covers. String lights were hung along the walls, creating a warm, inviting atmosphere. At 7:30 p.m., our first guests arrived, residents from Sunset Manor. Most were in their 80s and 90s, some using walkers or wheelchairs, all dressed in their finest clothes for what they'd been told was a special surprise dinner. Mr. Castellano, an 88-year-old former baker with no remaining family, arrived wearing a suit that hung loosely on his thin frame, a faded boutonniere pinned to his lapel. Young lady, he said to Harper as she greeted him, I haven't worn this suit since my granddaughter's wedding 8 years ago, but they said a talented girl had prepared a fancy Italian dinner, so I had to dress appropriately. Harper's face flushed with pleasure as she escorted him to a seat at the head table. I'm so glad you wore it, Mr. Castellano. You look very distinguished. The evening unfolded beautifully. By 8 o'clock, the room was filled with 47 people, far more than our original 22 seniors from Sunset Manor, regular attendees of the center's programs, teachers from Harper's school, neighbors, friends, and even some of my former students who wanted to support us. What struck me most was the authentic atmosphere. Unlike the carefully orchestrated social events my parents preferred, where conversations were strategic and appearances paramount, this gathering buzzed with genuine connection. When Harper stood to welcome everyone, her voice was initially shaky but grew stronger. Thank you all for coming on such short notice. This dinner was originally planned for my grandmother's 68th birthday, but plans changed unexpectedly. Instead, I'm honored to share it with all of you. The sincerity in her voice moved everyone. Everything you'll eat tonight has a story behind it. These are dishes from my great-great-grandmother's kitchen, recipes that have been in our family for generations. I hope you enjoy them as much as I enjoyed preparing them for you. As the serving began, I watched nervously for reactions to the sophisticated menu. My concerns dissolved as I witnessed genuine appreciation on every face. Mr. Castellano closed his eyes in bliss after tasting the ossobuco. Young lady, he called out to Harper, I haven't had food this good since my mother's kitchen in Naples, and I dare say yours might be better. Throughout the evening, people approached Harper with compliments, questions about recipes, and expressions of gratitude. I watched as my daughter blossomed under their genuine appreciation. When dessert time arrived, Harper briefly hesitated before bringing out the elaborately decorated birthday cake. She had removed the Happy 68th Birthday Victoria inscription but kept the timeline of photos as a conversation piece. Mr. Castellano, who had become something of an honored guest, stood shakily with his water glass raised. I'd like to propose a toast, he announced, his voice wavering but clear. To Harper, who turned disappointment into a gift for all of us, and to community, the family we choose. To community, everyone echoed, raising their glasses. As the evening extended well beyond our planned end time, no one seemed eager to leave. I found myself watching Harper move through the room, ensuring everyone had enough food, engaging in conversations, absolutely glowing with the joy of serving others. By the time we finished cleaning up at nearly 11 o'clock, Harper was exhausted but radiating happiness. As volunteers helped pack our supplies, people kept approaching to thank her, request recipes, and invite her to cook for other community events. Mom, Harper said quietly as we loaded the last containers into Alina's car, I'm really glad things turned out this way. In that moment, I realized we had learned something invaluable. While we couldn't control how others treated us, we had complete control over how we responded. My daughter had chosen generosity over bitterness, community over exclusivity, and authentic connection over social performance. The next morning, my phone filled with notifications. People had shared photos from the community dinner across social media, praising Harper's culinary talents and generous spirit. Our local community page featured several posts about the amazing young chef and her heartwarming dinner. Victoria called that afternoon, her voice strained. Mia, I saw the posts about some sort of community dinner. Yes, I replied simply, not offering further explanation. After an uncomfortable silence, Victoria spoke again. It looked nice, very charitable of you both. The word charitable, with its implication of noblesse oblige rather than genuine connection, ignited my carefully controlled anger. It wasn't charity, Mom, it was community. And it happened because Harper spent 4 days cooking an elaborate birthday dinner for you, only to be told 3 hours before that you'd decided on the Bernardin instead, with no children allowed. The conversation that followed was difficult but necessary. For the first time in my life, I set clear boundaries with my parents. I explained that moving forward, our relationship needed to change, that if they wanted to be part of our lives, they needed to demonstrate through actions that they valued Harper for who she was, not how she made them look. The aftermath wasn't easy. There was pushback, guilt trips, and attempts at manipulation, but watching Harper process the experience with such maturity gave me strength. 6 months later, subtle but significant changes had occurred. Victoria began making genuine efforts to repair her relationship with Harper, calling regularly, asking about her interests, attending school events without drawing attention to herself. Those monthly community dinners had evolved into Harper's passion project. The senior center officially partnered with her to host the family table, where people from all backgrounds shared meals together. Harper's confidence was remarkable now. She moved through kitchens with authority, teaching seniors and children alike. Her natural teaching ability reminded me of myself, though her culinary talents far exceeded mine. One evening, as we cleaned up after dinner, Harper casually mentioned her college focus. I want to study culinary arts with an emphasis on food anthropology, learning the cultural significance of traditional recipes, maybe eventually write a cookbook about immigrant family recipes and the stories behind them. That sounds perfect for you, I replied, genuinely impressed. Your work at the center has really shaped this vision. Harper nodded. If Grandma had shown up for that birthday dinner, I might still be focused on fancy restaurant techniques and impressing people. Now I understand that food is really about connection and cultural preservation. As spring progressed, Harper received an unexpected opportunity, a scholarship to a prestigious culinary program in New York, specifically for their summer intensive on traditional techniques from around the world. When she called Victoria to explain that the program conflicted with Victoria's annual charity gala, I watched nervously. To my surprise, Victoria's reaction was measured. Well, that sounds like a valuable opportunity, she said after a pause. Perhaps we could have lunch before you leave for New York. I'd like to hear more about this program. It wasn't effusive support, but it was acceptance, a significant step toward healthier relationships. One evening, sitting on our porch after preparation for the monthly community dinner, Harper shared a profound insight. Mom, I've been thinking about forgiveness lately. I was really hurt when Grandma and Grandpa canceled the birthday dinner. I put so much of myself into that meal, but I'm not angry anymore. That's a generous perspective, I noted. It's not about them deserving forgiveness, Harper clarified. It's about me not wanting to carry that hurt anymore and realizing they're limited by their own understanding of what matters. Besides, if they hadn't canceled, I might never have met Mr. Castellano or started the community dinners. Sometimes disappointments lead to unexpected gifts. Her wisdom, so mature for her 17 years, moved me deeply. Harper had grasped something that took me decades to understand, that forgiveness isn't about excusing harmful behavior, but about freeing oneself from resentment's burden. As I reflected on our journey, I realized the painful incident had catalyzed growth for both of us. I had finally found courage to establish healthy boundaries after decades of accommodation. Harper had discovered deeper purpose for her talents and developed resilience that would serve her throughout life. We couldn't control how others treated us, even those who should love us unconditionally, but we could control our responses to disappointment. We could choose bitterness or growth, isolation or community, resentment or creative transformation. The text that initially shattered our plans had ultimately strengthened our spirits. The dinner prepared with such care had found its perfect recipients, and the love Harper poured into her cooking returned to her multiplied from people who valued her efforts without condition. Sometimes the most beautiful opportunities emerge from our greatest disappointments. The rejection that felt so devastating had redirected us toward something far more meaningful than impressing social circles, toward building genuine community and discovering the joy of serving others. Thanks for listening to the story they never cared to hear. Sometimes the loudest revenge is quiet success. Like, subscribe, and share your moment. When did they realize you were never the weak one?